Asking for more money in the workplace can be a pretty tough conversation to have, especially when you're unsure about how it's going to be received or if it will affect your relationship with your manager. But knowing how to successfully negotiate a pay rise is pretty crucial, especially as the cost of living in the UK remains pretty high. To help me discuss all the tips and tricks you need to successfully negotiate a pay rise this year, I'm joined with Jess from HR. Hello Jess, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah,
And I'm
same.
so pleased you managed to make the journey from Liverpool down to London.
Yeah, especially in this heat.
Yeah.
It is hotter in London than it is in Liverpool, but it's good.
We
It's
are
nice to be
experiencing
here.
a heat wave, aren't we? And you know what? I'm trying really hard not to moan about the heat, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot, isn't it? But I'm very excited to have you on the podcast to chat
Same.
all things pay rise, all things negotiations, because I think,
Yeah.
like I mentioned in the intro, it can be really, really tough to have those conversations with your managers.
Mm-hmm.
But before I delve into all of that today, please introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Hi, Ola. Thank you. I'm Jess from HR, and I share employability tips and advice from a HR perspective online for all employees across the UK. So this can be really helpful if you haven't got a HR department or the HR department that you've got in work, you maybe are not that comfortable to go to. So I am like an impartial body out there that can really help you when it comes to formal and informal processes.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today to chat all things pay rises and salary negotiations. But I guess what I really want to know, because I've been following you online, mainly TikTok actually, what inspired you to start sharing content online?
I think the landscape of HR is changing, and I've noticed in my positions, HR is now more of a strategic arm for the
Yes.
business. Which is great because the business really does need that people lens. But for businesses who can't afford a really large HR team, sometimes it can be at the expense of that support for the employees.
Yeah.
So back in the day, you used to have the personnel department, which was a bit like an agony aunt, and people would knock on the door and say, I've got this issue, or how many holidays have I
Yeah.
got? And that doesn't seem to be present anymore in companies. And I can understand why, but I do think it just leaves a bit of a gap
Yeah.
for people. They don't know where to go to get impartial support and support which they can really trust. You do have companies like ACAS, which is non-for-profit. That's a company which is everything is free on there. You can go and get all kinds of advice, but it's quite clunky to go through.
Yeah.
Then you do have trade unions, which unions can be a little bit aggressive. So if you're just looking for something in the middle, something quite informal to go
Yeah.
and get some tips, then that's how I can help.
I love that. And you know what? I always really respect those that have taken the plunge to start sharing content online, because it can be really hard. Like,
Yeah.
you know what? Like, I remember how long it took me to post my very first video on Instagram. And I'm grateful for 22-year-old Ola, because I would not be sitting here in a studio with my own podcast had I not, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I always love knowing why people started their very own platforms themselves.
Yeah.
And obviously, I've got you on the podcast today, but I want to know Jess a little bit better, right? So I've got 2 quick fire questions for you. The first one is, what's one guilty pleasure you like to spend your money on?
Food. So, we've just had a conversation before saying I've just sat down and had a 3-course meal before I came here.
As you should.
It's a little treat to myself. I've got a day on my own. So yeah, that is my guilty pleasure. Food and coffee at the minute as well.
Oh, really? What's
Yeah.
your favourite cuisine?
I'd say Italian. I've just been to Gloria, so yeah.
Ooh,
Italian, yeah.
okay.
Italian street food I like.
That is good. I do love like a al fresco dining with
Yeah.
like pasta and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you made me hungry. Right. We're not talking about food anymore because my stomach's going to start rumbling. But my second question for you is, what's one piece of financial advice you'd give your younger self?
I would say I'm quite a good saver, and I did save quite a big chunk of money to buy my own property. I bought my first house on my own, so I was good at saving.
Yeah.
But now in hindsight, I probably should have invested as well. So I just had money in the bank, just sitting there, where really, and still to this day, I need to do a bit more research on how I can invest the money rather than it just sitting there. Obviously, interest rates can go up and down, and there's different ways that you can maybe get a better return on your money.
Wow, you know what? Loads of people do tend to say that on the podcast. Like, I always say, I wish I started investing the minute I stepped out of the womb, because I would be a homeowner by now. Do you know what I mean? But I get it. Investing is a really big one. And I also think, because, yes, there's podcasts like these that exist and try and simplify the process, but I think there's still that education gap or confidence gap that maybe stops people from actually making that plunge. Because I think I've spoken to so many people over the last 5 years that probably from day one of All Things Money has followed me, and they're like, like I got all the information, I've got all the tools, but I'm like, you need to make the start, you know? And I think that's what's really hard for people, isn't it?
It's definitely that confidence. It can be quite nerve-wracking, you know, because it's hard to know what is legit and what's not. I'm sure there's so many things, you know, out there that is, but if you're not from that financial background, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking to say, right, okay, I'm gonna go for this one, and you know, we're gonna put my money into this.
I agree. But we won't talk about investing all day, because once you get me started, we won't be able to stop. And I'm keen to know more about how people can actually get their pay rises this year, because I know there's loads of people that have actually reached out to me and they're like, Ola, I'm really struggling financially at work. Why do you think people struggle to ask for pay rises or even feel uncomfortable bringing up that conversation in the workplace?
Yeah, I think people really see it as a taboo subject. You know, even outside of the workplace, to talk about money with your family and friends sometimes can feel a little bit taboo. So when you're in work, sometimes people can see it as the parent and child relationship, and the employee is the child and the company is the parent, and it's that power dynamics, and I think that sometimes can make the employee feel a little bit inferior, and they're too scared to ask. Sometimes it's a fear of rejection as well. So people don't want to be rejected, and they also don't want to, they may feel that they're going to compromise the position that they're already in or upset their manager and so on. So I think, a lot of people really struggle to make that first move and having the conversation. And it is quite difficult. I can appreciate why.
Yeah. Taboo is definitely a big one. The fact that we're in 2025 and talk about money with our friends, colleagues, in the workplace is still such a big taboo, right? What do you think needs to change to remove that stigma?
I think the workplaces are still very secretive on money. Secretive in terms of like profits, which again, you can understand maybe there needs to be some confidentiality there with business revenue. But also, you know, salary transparency is not always there as well. Again, for different reasons. But I think the more open businesses can be in talking with employees about salary, given that transparency on, you know, what is possible, what is not. And even supporting them from like a benefits perspective as well. You know, financial education, you know, that can really empower people to have those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is, like you mentioned, a lot of secrecy. I know in some of my friends' workplaces, they are discouraged to talk about salaries amongst themselves. And I think that is wild. I think that's why the gender pay gap exists, right? And a whole host of other issues, right? So I guess, you know, for those probably listening on the podcast today, when do you think is the right time to start thinking about negotiating a pay rise?
Honestly, I think it's when you've got something that you can really put on the table to show you your return on investment. So it could be a project that you've just done and you've really added value to the business. You could have saved the business money. You could have improved the culture. You could have really reformed the customer relationship. Something where you can really show how you have, you know, inputted into the success of that company. Sometimes, you know, people might ask for a pay rise and they've got nothing to back it up with why. I just think you're going to fail if you do it that way. You really have to have some strong reasoning as to why you should get a pay rise, so that you can advocate for yourself.
Yeah, it's so true. I think for a lot of people, actually, a lot of my friends, they've been in the workplace since we graduated uni, which, believe it or not, was like 5 years ago now. And so they're very much at an itching point where they're like, I am ready for a pay rise. If I haven't already had one, I definitely am due one now. Do you think it's ever too soon as well, alternatively, to start thinking about a pay rise, especially with the cost of living always creeping up?
Yeah, I think it can be too soon. And, you know, I've been in roles where people have, you know, almost demanded pay rises, and you've really got to be quite tactical on when you ask for it. You know, you've got to, as I say, have something to show why the company should be giving you a pay rise, and don't just expect that it is a given, because there are certain restraints that you have to sort of understand. So it's all about compromise, but you definitely shouldn't hold back, because if you never put that on the table, it's never going to happen. Like, you've got to really push for it yourself. It's just how you do it is the tricky part.
Yes, I agree. I think for some people, they go in thinking they deserve it. And I think that's the wrong attitude to kind of go in, right? And I think for a lot of people that I do know that they are very much are deserving of it, but I think it's just how you kind of approach the question, the conversation. And I guess for me, I'm keen to know, how do you actually prepare yourself for a conversation like that? Because for me, I've actually never had a manager where I've had to ask for a pay rise. So for me, I will be like skirting around for like a year or so before I finally pluck up the courage. So how do you actually prepare yourself for something like that?
You have to really make it business related. So someone might want a pay rise because the mortgage payment's gone up, or they've just got a new car. There could be a personal reason why someone wants a pay rise. Well, it's all going to be personal, right, when it's your money. But you really need to take that out of the situation and really make it relatable to the business. So, as I say, it could be when you've developed a new skill. It could be when you've shown how you can really elevate that business, whether it's revenue, customer, culture. Also, to really prepare, you've got to look at the market and the industry to see what the going rates are.
Yes.
And it can be quite easy to do that. All you need to do really is look on websites such as Indeed, Read, all the job sites, and put in your job title. Make sure that it is actually aligned to what you do. LinkedIn is another good one as well. And just see if you can get a comparison of the standard sort of rate of pay for your role. And if you are, quite far behind, then you can go in with that to say, actually, this company, and this company are all offering like 20k more.
Which is crazy.
Can we have a conversation? Also, be prepared for them to say no. But I think what is important is what you then say afterwards and what you do afterwards. It's really about, well, if I can't have a pay rise now, like what can I do to achieve a pay rise in the near future? Help me to progress and help me to really progress financially.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you're in the workplace, things can be so fast paced that we actually forget some of our achievements. And I remember during my placement year, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I remember always making like a note of everything I did. So if I served I worked out how many customers I would serve in a day or how much revenue I brought the business, and I did that for CV reasons. And would you recommend people maybe do the same in the workplace as well?
So I always call it a brag book. It's really good to have a brag book. And when you are, maybe a customer sends in like a recognition, keep that to one side, and maybe you get recognition from internally. Maybe you've smashed all your KPIs. Anything that's positive, keep it to one side. And if you're not getting feedback, then ask for it. You should be asking your manager, what can I do to improve? I'm so ambitious to really succeed in this role. I do want to progress in the role. I want to progress in the company. Really make yourself known, and all of that will put you in good stead for when you do have those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes we just, again, think that, I don't know, let's say you're a barista and you have managed to upsell, I don't know, from a latte to a macchiato. I don't know if that's an upgrade, but I think things like that, I think skills, some people really underestimate their skills, don't they, in certain workplaces. And I think, it's really important to remember, guys, whatever you're doing in the workplace, make a note of it, because you never know how well perceived it will be.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah. And, sometimes companies will have set levels of pay. So, you may try and negotiate and there isn't an option to go to the next level of pay, but there may be an option to get an increase on a pension contribution or an added benefit like health insurance. There's other things other than just the actual salary aspect as well.
No, I agree. And I think people often forget that. But I guess, Jess, let's say I've done all my preparing. I know what the going rate is in the job I'm in. What are some of your top tips for negotiating that salary?
Yeah, do your market research, so have all of that ready. Again, get your brag book, get all your achievements to hand. Try and have a face-to-face conversation with your manager. Again, it can be quite scary. It is a taboo. It shouldn't be a taboo topic, but it can feel like a taboo topic. Instead of sending an email, really try and sit down and have a conversation. I would let your manager know that this is what you're going to be talking about, and whether there's a good time to arrange the meeting. You don't want to get them where maybe the week before they just set the budget and you're a week late, you know.
Yes.
You really want to try to be having those conversations at a time it suits your manager, but also at a time where it's more likely to be given the consideration that it deserves.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So I've got a question for you, Jess. Do you think people should wait until like their reviews, or do you think people can review it ask at any time?
Yeah, ask at any time, you know. For me, your reviews are a good option to ask, but probably it's almost anticipated, you know. You can ask all through the year. You can ask at any point. There's no right or wrong time really to ask for a pay rise. It's all about when is the right time for you, and when can you really show that you're ready for a pay rise.
Yeah, that's a really good response, and I'm glad to know that, because I'm sure there'll probably be people asking that question. I guess another big question that probably people want to know, especially because whilst cost of living is high for us, businesses are also kind of struggling financially as well. So how do you navigate I don't have the budget response to give you a higher pay rise, for example?
Yeah. Do you know, that can actually be a legitimate reason. So, you know, I've been in businesses where the budget's been set, you know, for the year, and actually maybe the business hasn't performed as it set out.
Yeah.
And, you know, the money's got to come from somewhere for pay rises. But then it also can be used as an excuse as well.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of that being said, the response I would really have for that is, okay, well, if there isn't a budget this cycle, what can I do to make sure that it's included in the next budget round? So they might have in-year budgets, it may be a full year scope, but if you're sort of laying it on the table now, then it can be almost forecasted or accrued for the next time.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a difficult one, that, because you can't force a company to give you a pay rise. All you can do is really make it known that you feel that you're deserving of one. Make it known that, you know, you're happy to negotiate with them as well, in terms of, you know, maybe you do need to pick up a few more duties elsewhere to then step into a different role, or maybe you do need to wait a couple of months, but you really have to put yourself out there, and if you don't ask, you're never going to get.
So true. And I guess, you know, for those that are probably in that position, because I know there are a lot of people in the position where they can't successfully negotiate a monetary pay rise. You mentioned obviously maybe potentially negotiating like pension contributions or health insurance. What else can people maybe bring to the table as well in terms of negotiating?
There could be things like car allowance if you're in like an office role and you're commuting. Maybe that is something that you could ask for. There's also things like online benefits that a lot of companies have. So you get certain discounts, gym membership and so on. You could ask for things like flexible work. And now sometimes people, you know, may be asking for a pay rise because an example is, I don't know, they need wraparound childcare.
Yes.
So to be able to afford that, you know, they really need more money, and it's one of those the chicken and the egg situations. If a company can't give you a pay rise at that time, you could maybe ask for benefits around flexible working, and that could maybe, you know, actually be more beneficial to you. And I'm sure the salary increase would be beneficial, but flexible working for me is
could
just
be a dream for some people.
It could be a dream.
Yeah, that's a really handy one. And I think another one that people often forget is holiday pay as well, as a potential opportunity to kind of negotiate, because most of us are stuck to maybe 28 days. So maybe that's something they could also present to the table as well, because again, that's not necessarily a business cost to the business, but something they might be able to offer instead, right?
Yeah, potentially. So if you're only getting the statutory amount, then maybe there's a day or so that you could add on to that. Especially if you work for a small, medium company, it may be easier for them to give those types of benefits. I think for a larger organisation, it's hard that they're not going to set a precedent with it. But yeah, it's definitely an option.
Yeah. So I think it's really important, guys, to, like, if you can, get creative with it, especially if they do say no, because I know there are often people that sadly get rejected when they do, I guess, propose that conversation. But I guess another question I have for you, Jess, is what are some common myths people often believe about salary negotiations?
So common myth can be negotiated at the beginning of the role, so before you've started at the interview stage, the job offer stage. Absolutely, yes, negotiate at this time, but people can negotiate during the position as well. Another myth is people think that you have to have maybe gained a new qualification, or you've had to take on more duties. You don't. It could just be to keep in line with the market rates. Sometimes as well, companies will try and keep pace with the competitors. So really try and be savvy and see what the competitors are offering.
Yeah.
And that can be a really good hack when it comes to negotiation. Another myth that I've seen from a HR perspective is that everyone has to receive the same. So when it comes to like yearly merit reviews, for example, first of all, people sometimes assume that it has to be in line with inflation. It doesn't. And if it was, I think every business would be out of business.
Literally.
So like, I don't know what inflation was last year, but I know at one point it was like near 9%, wasn't it?
High.
So a business, well, they might be able to afford 9% increases for everyone, but it doesn't have to be in line with inflation. A business doesn't even have to give an increase every year. So I think sometimes that's a misunderstanding from people who are in those businesses that get increases every year. They believe that, well, it's automatic and we must get one the year after. Well, it's not. So that is almost like the flip side, that, you're not automatically entitled to a pay rise. So that's really why it's quite important to feel confident enough to be able to have the conversations and negotiate if you need to. And also, one more myth is that people sometimes assume that if they do a good job, the manager will just call them in and say, wow, you've been fantastic, here's a $5,000 pay rise.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't happen. You've really got to push that yourself. And sometimes a manager doesn't even have the power to do that, So
true.
Yeah, you've got to be making sure that your message is getting to the right people. So it might be that your manager then has to take it to their line manager.
Yes.
Or, you may go via the HR department. It's really knowing how to navigate the system.
Yeah. So funny. You said so many things there. I think the first thing that you said is just because you're doing a good job, your manager isn't necessarily just going to be like, you deserve some more money.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things is to be your own self-advocate in the workplace, because no one else is going to do it for you. And I think, again, I know I mentioned the gender pay gap earlier, but there is, even regardless of gender, there's such big pay discrepancies amongst people in working in the same roles in the same job. So clearly there's something going on where either people had the balls to negotiate a higher salary at the beginning of their job, job interview process, or at one point they've managed to successfully negotiate a higher raise. So I think it's like you have to advocate for yourself, don't you?
Especially long-serving employees. So when you joined a job 10 years ago, the salary would have been a lot less than what it is now, just because of the cost of living. But over the 10 years, you may have only got a 1% increase each year. So you've slowly come up. And then someone new comes in way above you. And it's not because they're any better or they're more experienced. It's just because they've been offered the salary, which is the going rate in the market. But the company's failed to address those that are already in the role, and that's something that is quite common. And unless you really step forward and say, my salary needs to be revised, sometimes it's not going to be looked at.
And I think, again, I know it's frowned upon, but it's not illegal to discuss your pay with your colleagues. I think it's really important that we remove the stigma of salaries in the workplace, because how else are you meant to know that you're deserving or what other people are being paid if you don't talk about it, right?
Yeah, I know. This is something that comes up a lot. So employers don't want people to talk because it will create so many issues with salaries, and there are more money and it would be a bit of a headache. But there should be transparency, and people should be able to talk about it. And actually, you can't be disciplined for saying to your colleague how much money are you on, or showing each other your pay slips. You can't actually be disciplined for that. Now, quite a lot of employers will threaten disciplinary action, or you'll find in some of the old contracts it says that you must not discuss pay. But actually, companies do need to be careful that they're not sort of going against the regulations with equal pay, because it can potentially turn into some kind of tribunal claim if a company was to discipline someone for having open conversations around pay.
Wow.
Yeah, so they do need to be careful.
Yeah, that's a big one. I know it's a very, very big hot topic about whether or not you're allowed to discuss pay in the workplace. So thank you for clearing that up. I've got a really interesting question for you, Jess, because I'm sure people have probably done this in the past and it's worked very well for them.
Yeah.
Do you think you should lightly threaten the fact that you're going to leave your job as a reason to kind of push for more money?
Yeah. Again, that's another tricky question. It does work. I'll be honest, it does work. I've seen it from a HR perspective. It doesn't always work though. It's not 100%, effective. You'll run the risk of your employer saying, "Okay, we'll accept your resignation," and then you're like, "I don't have a job now." But those roles where maybe you're in a niche role and you're sort of savvy to the fact that that company needs your skill set, they're the type of roles that when you say, I've been approached by a company, I went for the interview, got the job, and it's so much more money, that's when it might be like, okay, well, let's have a conversation. It shouldn't have to get to that point.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, people are given pay rises once they go to hand the notice in. But something that you could do to sort of get to that same place but not hand your notice in is just say that you've been approached by a company.
Okay.
So you have a lot of recruiters that will sort of reach out and say, "Hey, I've seen your CV online, or I've seen your LinkedIn profile. We've got a role. It's pitched at 55k. It's this. We think you'll be a good match. It's your skill set, X, Y, and Z. Are you interested?" And you could say no. But what you could do is you could take that to your employer to say, "I've actually been approached by a recruitment company, and they're offering 10k more. Like I'm happy where I am, but can we have a discussion here around pay because something seems amiss?" And then that could be a way of instigating that conversation as well.
Yeah, it's good to know, especially from a HR professional, because I know a lot of people have done it and it's worked, like you said, but then also it hasn't, right?
It's quite
and then
risky. Yeah.
It is a risky tactic. Could I do that? I don't know. Never say never. But I guess with that, I'm keen to know what percentage of people manage to successfully negotiate a pay rise in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, according to the research online, it's like between 85 to 90% actually successfully negotiate a pay rise. So
Wow.
that's pretty high.
It's higher than what I thought it was going to be.
It's higher than what I thought, actually, but that's really positive. It doesn't say in terms of how long it is, before you get the pay rise. That might just be for like over a period of 5 years, as an example. But it's really positive to see that actually those that do put themselves forward and break that barrier are going to be successful. If not straight away, you will be successful in the end.
Well, guys, you heard that stat. If that's not a reason to go speak to your manager at some point in your career, I don't know what will be the driving force. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess just before I let you go today on the podcast, would you mind sharing just a final 3 set of tips for anyone, I guess, who is on the fence or maybe just too scared to actually have that conversation to negotiate their salary?
Yeah. Brag book. Get your brag book. If you haven't got one now, just start making one. Go back on your past achievements as well. Nothing too far in advance. Maybe in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Market research. Make sure that you're pitching yourself within what is standard within the market. And the third one, have the conversation. Just put yourself out there and have the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think nothing happens without a conversation. And look, like we discussed, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, it's a big taboo in the UK when we talk about finances, money, everything. But it has to be done. And I think especially because living in the UK now, it's getting more and more expensive. Yes, inflation is slowly coming down, but the costs are still going up, right? So I think, even for your own, I guess, financial well-being, stability, empowerment, I think it's really important that these conversations are being had, aren't they?
Yeah, empowerment is really key, because even if it is a no, you can have that conversation again. You've done it, you can do it again.
Yeah.
And who knows, we might say yes. So definitely have the conversation.
Well, like you mentioned, that stat.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, guys. Yeah. So if anyone does manage to successfully negotiate their pay rise, please let me or Jess know, because I'm really keen. Yeah. I want you guys to be thriving in the workplace financially as well as your advancing into your career. But Jess, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Same.
It's been a real pleasure. Before I let you go, if anyone would like to follow you online or seek professional HR advice or tips, where can they find you?
So Instagram, it's Jess from HR, and TikTok as well. So I post daily videos, career advice, HR advice. So, you know, what I'm facing a disciplinary, what should I do?
Yes.
And then general career advice. DM me, write on my stories. You know, I'll try my best to come back and feel empowered in the workplace.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jess. As always, guys, all of the links will be in the podcast description. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.